Bringing the knees wide in this posture allows the belly some room in between your thighs. Starts to open up the hips. And just see how you're feeling here on the mat as you settle in. You can make any shifts to make yourself a little bit more comfortable. Maybe grab one of those props for under your knees, under your forehead, if it would help. And then just try to settle into a little bit of stillness wherever you land. Begin to follow your breath, moving in and out of the body. And as you're pretty still here, your breath is still causing some movement within your body, a little rise and fall. Along the backside of your spine. And some lateral movement as your lungs expand. And contract. So just paying attention to this breath is maybe something new to your day. You might not have really noticed your breath until now. And the good thing about our breath, the way it keeps us alive, is we don't really have to even pay it any mind. It's just there. And in our yoga practice, then we take the opportunity to connect and really pay attention to it. And let it start or continue to develop. Because often when we start to pay attention, it naturally deepens. Starts getting a little fuller, takes a more intentional shape. And maybe while you're breathing, your hips get a little heavier toward your heels. If your arms, your hands are at all rigid, just try to soften. Just letting them sink into the mat wherever they're landing, whether it's in front of you or by your sides, anywhere at all. Last couple of breaths here on your own. And before we get ready to move from this first shape, let's just draw a big breath in together through the nose. Feel it fill you up, and then open your mouth, side out. And then start to bring in some movement. You might lift right up if you're ready to come out of this child's pose. You might just roll your head side to side, temple to temple, and gradually work your way up. We'll come to a tabletop position eventually. Allow your hips to shift, let your legs straighten out behind you one at a time. It might be appropriate or feel good to pop the hips up into downward facing dog. If you are ready for that and want to straighten both legs at a time, otherwise just kind of move around here. Cat and cow might also feel good as you mobilize the spine. My hair is kind of flying in my face here. Let's work your way out of that first posture into some movement here. And then for our next pose that we'll set up, I'm gonna go ahead and grab my blanket and have it available on the right side of my mat. Coming back into this tabletop. We'll set up for a swan pose, which is akin to our half pigeon in an active practice. So to set this up, I'll slide my right shin forward and left leg lengthens back. Of course, if you're feeling this in your knees, we want to open the hips, but we don't want to strain the knees. So you can always flip onto your back and create a figure 4 stretch to do a recline version of this posture. The same stretch. And where my blanket comes in here, if there's any space under this right hip, if it's floating in the air, you can set it underneath, and good thing about a blanket or towel, you can fold it up as many times as you need to bridge that gap. A block or a pillow might also work well here. And then we'll take a couple breaths upright. Upright is a place that you can always stay. We always, or I shouldn't say always, but most of us want to melt forward right away on this posture. So maybe see how it feels, especially on the front side of your left hip, if you just take a few breaths here. Keeping the torso lifted. If your eyes open in the transition, just gently close them again. Try to keep the focus inward as much as you can in this practice. And then if you are coming down to your forearms, maybe forehead all the way to the mat, on an exhale, letting yourself release forward. And this is where I like multiple props, is if you are feeling a little uncomfortable coming all the way to the mat, I've got this nice bolster that my friend Paul gave me. And you can take pillow, bolster, block underneath your chest, underneath your forehead. This is really cozy, just giving yourself that place to land, taking a little bit more of the effort out of the shoulders and keeping you supported. You can turn one ear to the mat or have that forehead down. Just play with whatever works. These first breaths, about the first minute of the posture, are really for settling and finding what's going to work for your body today. It might look a little different than the last time that you did this particular pose in this particular practice. And then settle in with your breath wherever it is that you land. See what's going on in your hips. See how it affects your breathing. There is a lot of tightness, a lot of tension. See what you can do with your breath to find a little more ease. So I mentioned that this posture is similar visually, aesthetically to half pigeon. So why don't we just call it half pigeon and yin? It's a good question. So there's a lot of subtle but distinct variables going on in a yin practice, which is a more passive practice. Our body is not as warm as it would be at the end of a yang practice, an active vinyasa practice, for example. Our muscles are cooler, they're in a different place. And we're not activating, we're trying to disengage the muscles once we get into the shape to really relax and stretch the connective tissue. So it's just a different intention, different purpose. So even if the shape looks the same, it's not quite exactly the same posture. Therefore, it's got a yin name and it's got a yang name. And each one is a little bit unique. It's not just meant to be confusing. We'll take a few more breaths here. Notice where you've gone. Notice if the sensation has really amped up or if you've kind of settled in here, if you've deepened. We're all going to experience each shape a little bit differently. So just notice and acknowledge where you've gone. And take another breath. And as you're getting ready to release here, sliding the hands back to lift on up through the torso, hitting that rewind button. And then as you come out of the hips, you can either ease onto this right hip and make your way back to your tabletop. Carefully stretching that right leg behind you in some way is usually a good idea, whether it's through table, through your downward dog, lifting that leg up high. That might feel good. It might feel like a little bit too much. So just take whatever you need. Leave what you don't need. I'm going to move my prop across the way, my blanket, and take a couple more breaths, a little bit more movement. And then once you're ready, from your hands and knees, the left shin will drop forward next, setting up the other side of our swan pose, scooting the right leg back. Another thing, personally with my swan versus my pigeon, you can see it a little bit more on this side. My shin is angled in quite a bit. I'm not even trying to crank the shin to anywhere close to parallel to the top of the mat, which sometimes it's not really required of half pigeon either, but a lot of times we have more space when the body is warmer to get a little greater angle here with a leg that's forward. But my heel is in quite a bit, and I'm still feeling a lot of sensation, a good stretch here. So once again, I'm going to keep this upright, trying to keep the shoulders down as I breathe here on my left side. Different things going on here on different sides. So Pay attention. You might need some additional height in your blanket, your prop under the left hip. You might need less. You might not even need that prop from one side to the next. It's okay if you don't have exactly the same setup. And take another inhale where you're at. And remembering you can keep it upright if you did on the other side, or walking it forward. I'm going to come back down onto my lovely bolster here, sinking it in. I'm going to turn my opposite ear to the mat. Just find what's comfortable. That's always the big paradox of yoga, in yin in particular, is we're looking to feel something. And often it's uncomfortable. It shouldn't be painful, but we should get into that territory where we're not completely comfortable. That's where we'll experience some growth. But along with that discomfort, you're also wanting to make other parts of the body that aren't as actively or aren't as directly involved with the posture. For example, the shoulders, the neck, the head, the chest. We're stretching the hips here. So all the other areas of the body, the hands, the feet, trying to make those as comfortable and softened as possible. The more energy you use in holding yourself in place and tensing, the less likely we're going to be able to relax into the stretch of our connective tissue, which is what this practice is all about. Finding that release. Using your breath as you continue to deepen in. That's why we stay in the poses for a while. Giving yourself a chance to really sink in. Keep your breath flowing. Notice when and notice where you might be able to continue to release. If it involves moving your props to deepen in, maybe scoot things out of the way, seeing what happens. There's no right or wrong, just make sure you're feeling something. Just try to always be accessing that sensation. Hand in hand with the relaxation. It doesn't always seem logical that those two would go hand in hand. Using your breath to get you there. And just a little bit more on the second side. Take another breath in, start to slide your hands back. And as we breathe out, lifting up. And again, slowly, carefully releasing out of your hips. Stretching your leg behind you. There's no such thing as moving too slowly in this practice. We take a long time getting in to the body in each shape, so take as much time as you need to get out. Don't jump up out of the postures. And circle out that hip, sway your hips side to side. Anything you're needing to do here. And then from here, we will come onto the back. No rush to get there, just giving you that place to go. And once you lie down, just move pretty instinctively, whether it's hugging your knees in or taking a long body stretch, a good morning stretch, whatever it is that you're needing. Just continue to find that natural movement, letting go of those swans that we just did, getting into the hips pretty deeply there. And for a few breaths here, once you've had the movement that you need, just take your hands by your sides and close your eyes down and find some stillness for just 4 to 5 breaths here. And once you've completed those few breaths, that little bit of settling here, let's take the arms up overhead. And we'll find banana pose, but Bananasana. That's a fun one to say. And we'll come to the right. So imagining a banana shape, we're going to make that with the body. So take your feet to the right bottom corner of your mat. Your left ankle can cross over your right for some added stretch along the side body. This is a nice side body stretch. And if your hips moved with you when you moved your legs, take them back over toward the left. So we want to anchor the hips. The hips aren't moving. And then at the same time we're moving the lower half, you might pick your shoulders up and take your arms, your head, your upper body, leaving the hips once again as you take your hands, arms over to the upper right corner. So we're making a nice half moon shape here, crescent moon with the body, banana, whatever you need to visualize. And then just like the crossing of the ankles, if you want to hang on to your left wrist with your right hand to gently, but not super actively, pull a little added stretch into that side body, you can do that. Try to remain pretty anchored through both shoulders. Keep anchored through the hips. That left hip will be the furthest over to the left side of your mat, if that wasn't clear. And this won't be a super long hold, but if your sensation goes away, mine usually does pretty quickly here. So you can
Put your hands and your feet a little bit further over if you want, anchoring that left hip, finding a little bit more. Let's take a couple breaths more. And then release through your center. Just come back, and I like to let my arms come down in between. And you might windshield wipe your knees, your feet side to side a bit as you settle in the center here. Take a couple breaths. And then we'll come over to the left side. So move my feet first, going into it the same way. Left foot moving over, right ankle crossing, hips staying where they are, and then picking up the shoulder girdle just a bit to make that nice curve. So everything except the hips moving over to the left corners of your mat to stretch the right side of the body. Bananasana. It's so fun, I had to say it again. So conducting our lives largely from home for a lot of us. I've got a whiteboard in this room. It's my kids' playroom if you turn this camera around. And I will sometimes write the sequence of poses on that whiteboard to help me. I don't often reference it, but I just put it there just in case. And one day my older son said, "What's a bananasana?" So that's how you spell in Sanskrit this pose, Bananasana, Bananasana. Just how it sounds. They're pretty cute little yogis, my kids. They don't have quite as much patience as most of us do as adults, but those seeds are being planted, I hope. Take a few more breaths. Another one here. And as you come back to the middle this time, letting your breath out, let's hug the knees in. Rock out the low back here. Should feel pretty nice. Maybe trace some little circles with your knees in either direction. And then however you'd like to travel there, whether you rock and roll your way up to seated or roll onto your side and press up, just come on up to your seat. You can face whatever direction you would like on your mat. I'm going to turn and face the camera so you guys can see this next one visually if you need it. We're going to set up for shoelace pose. And if you know it, you can start to create that. I'm going to take the right leg on top first. And if you know it, you know there's a few options here. So half shoelace, I will show you first. So my right leg crosses over. This might be enough for you, just having your sole of the foot on the ground, in which case you can stay right here. hugging this in, adding in a twist. All of those are good options. If you've got some more space, the right heel can continue to work its way toward the left hip. And then in the process, the right knee comes down toward the left. If there's some space here, you see I've got plenty of space, you can wedge a blanket, a pillow in here for support. Okay, that's our half shoelace. This is a good place to work. You can fold forward over your half shoelace. Final option here. Brace yourself behind, full shoelace, the left leg bends, left heel works its way toward the right hip. And then the key here, grounding this right sits bone. Yeah. So right away, when you get both of those buns down, heels snug in, you feel this a lot in the outer hips. Another place we can take a prop, and just like our swan pose, you don't have to go anywhere else. You don't have to take this into a forward fold. You can just sit here, hands either on your thighs, hands grounded, and take in all the sensation happening in the outer hips. If it's available, if you need some more, and you can keep those sits bones grounded, you can start to walk this forward. What happens here is the torso puts a little weight on this top leg. It really, for me at least, it intensifies the sensation. So just find where you need to go. If it's too much, come on back. I'm going to use the blanket to prop my elbows. You can also take your chin into your hands. You can strategically place a block or something under your forehead here. Or maybe your forehead, your chin rests on your top leg. We're all going to end up in a little different place here. So wherever you have landed, find your calm, your depth, and your breath. And it's always our barometer. If you can breathe pretty calmly and easily in a posture, then your breath is supporting what your body is doing. If the breath gets really stressed, really frantic, then go back. Go back a step, go all the way out. Make whatever change you need. Just honor what's going on. Notice what's tense. Notice what's hanging on to stuff. See where you can just loosen and release that, even just a smidge. It might be the shoulders, it might be your jaw. Awareness in the hips themselves, where you can just loosen teeny tiny bit. Maybe all it takes to access a little bit more depth. Final breaths here. You guys have got it. Another deep inhale. And as you exhale, send your spine back upright. Lean back again in your hands and release those legs. Ooh. The good yin pose, it sometimes feels like you'll never make your way out of it. Like, how am I going to move out of this? But you will. Just go slow and take those windshield wipers with the knees. This is a really good counter rotation of the hips for our shoelace, countering that posture. And only when you're ready, we'll set up second side. So right leg can extend, give you the same options, crossing the left leg across the way. This is a great place to be. It can result in a twist if this is where you're going. Or perhaps the left heel works its way in, half shoelace, so we're already there. Can take this into that fold. It deserves mention that half shoelace for this straight leg on the bottom is a really nice hamstring stretch. So if you're thinking of it as, oh, I'm not going all the way in, it's just a different pose. It's not any better or worse. But if you're going for full shoelace, right heel comes to that left hip, both buns down on the ground, heels come in, blanket might come in between the knees or in front of you. And I'm going to spend a few breaths here upright, following my own advice, not to rush toward that end goal, if you will. Should not be a finish line in yoga. We get accustomed to rushing toward a finish line with everything we do. Enjoying that journey along the way. And just like our other hip opening swan pose from earlier, left side may not look the same as the right, may not feel the same. So you might stay upright, you might start to walk forward, honoring each individual side, always, always. Doesn't matter if they look the same. Trying to sink those sits bones down, particularly if you came forward, they might want to lift up a bit, pressing back, and then trying to take that engagement out as you release into the pose. There's a good quote with yin yoga that I know I've shared before, and it's a paraphrase. I don't even remember who it's from at this point without referencing, but with yin, we use the poses to get into the body, not the reverse. We're not using the body to get into the poses. We're using the poses to get into the body. So they're just a vehicle to find that space, to find what's going on. Use your breath here. Continue to soften, continue to release.
If there are moments that you really just want to get out, that you are experiencing that discomfort, if it's not painful, if your breath is okay, see if you can stay for a little bit more. See what happens. That's often when the work begins, when we really want to get out. What happens if we stay? Few final breaths more. Breathe in again with me. And let your spine come upright if you folded. Leaning back. Releasing those legs. Windshield wiping. One more time. Good, and then keeping this from seated for our next posture. In this case, if you're on a mat, you might want to turn to the long way like I'm facing right now. We'll come into a hip hop, come into a dragonfly straddle stretch here. So I know I often give this as an option to take one leg at a time. Let's go both legs at a time. Even if your wide straddle is right here, doesn't matter. Let's take both legs out at a diagonal, and my sits bones are off the mat, so I'm gonna sit up on this blanket. Yeah, it's a lot more comfy here. And you can use your pillow, you can use blocks in front of you as we prepare to take this into a forward fold. But let your legs be an angle that allows you to sit up nice and tall. So that seems to be the running theme of the night, is spend a few breaths here before you fold. Just shoulders sink down, maybe you roll them up and back. Feeling this tall, upright spine. Feeling the muscles of your legs and trying to settle them a bit here. Lift the arms up tall. And on your exhale, we'll bow forward if you're going there. And just like the width of our legs does not matter, how far forward or not your chest is folded also of no consequence. So if you are not very deep in this at all, do not worry. I'm not terribly flexible from this pose. I'm going where I can feel something. I'm not worrying that my chest is not all the way down to the ground or even down to my block. I'm just trying to use this block underneath my rib cage, and it's nowhere close. So if your arms are stretched forward, Lots of tension, bend your elbows. That'll let your shoulders soften, your arms, everything just kind of find some more ease. If you've got any flexion in your feet, your calves, just try to soften those feet, try to loosen everything up. As I'm folded here, my spine is nice and rounded. I'm not concerned with coming into this with a flat back leading with the chest, as we often go into seated forward folds when we stretch. Rounding the spine will allow that stretching of the vertebrae, the connective tissue in the spine, pulling those vertebrae away from one another. Lots of good stuff happening in this pose. Last rounds of breath. Deep breath in. As you breathe out, pressing the mat away, the floor away, to rise on up. Leaning back and let the legs work their way in. I'm going to take a nice release through a reverse tabletop. So just lifting the hips, allowing the head to gently drop back. Countering that forward fold with a gentle little back bend here. Dropping it down when you're ready. And once you are set, once you're released, let's meet on the belly. Easing into a prone Shavasana shape. Your arms can be by your sides with an ear resting to the mat, or maybe palms stacked to let your forehead rest on that top hand. Shift your hips side to side. Take a couple breaths here. And then if your arms are by your sides, let's all come to this stacking of the palms with the elbows out. And forehead just resting on top of the top hand. If you've been here for a bit, you can switch your hands. And then once you're ready, just let your right knee slide along the floor, coming into a Spider-Man half frog position. So my thigh is coming perpendicular to my hip, and this right hip is sinking down. The right shin and heel are in alignment with the knee. If it's angled in a little bit, that's okay too. With just a picture of frog's leg
and let that kind of be your guide, or Spider-Man, again, going back to that visual. So I'll give you a couple of options here. If it would feel really nice and relaxing to tee your arms out and take your left ear to the mat, you can go there. You can even turn your right ear to the mat to twist away from your hip opener. Or if you would like, keeping your Spider-Man leg, keeping your frog leg, propping up on the elbows, taking Sphinx in the upper body while this right hip is still settling down toward the mat. And then release through your glutes, release through your hamstrings, release through your shoulders. Elbows are right underneath the shoulders for support. Few more breaths here with this back bend, hip opening combo. Try to relax through your low back. Another breath. And release your forehead back down to the mat. Elbows come out, palms stack. Coming down with your exhale, releasing your right leg back. You can bend and straighten that leg. Shifting the hips. And once you're ready, we'll come right into that left side, left knee, left leg sliding up, creating that Spider-Man half frog position. Left side of your rib cage, left hip heavy toward the mat. The hip probably won't be touching the mat, but just find that weightiness to bring more sensation in. And if and when you're ready, you can always go out to arms to a T, ear turned to the mat, or you can come back into your Sphinx pose. A spider Sphinx. It's kind of a tongue twister. I'm feeling this more on this side. My left hip is always pretty predictably more tight. I'm feeling it more in the low back as well. So notice what's going on. Maybe easing up on your back bend just a bit. Coming all the way out if it's too much. Releasing through the legs, releasing through the glutes. Just a few breaths more. This isn't a super long hold. Still finding that heaviness through the left side. Last breath here. And as you exhale, chest releases down. Left leg slides back. I'm gonna bend both of my knees. Windshield wipe side to side with the feet this time. And we only have one place left to go here, and it's our Shavasana. So you're on your belly. If you are feeling good here, you might turn an ear to the mat and just take a prone Shavasana. I'm feeling called there myself right now, but if you've been on your belly long enough, then flip on over to your back. Use any props you need behind your head, behind your knees. Set up your final shape however you would like it to look, however you would like it to feel, more importantly. And settle in. Take a breath in through your nose. Sigh it out through your mouth. And allow yourself these last few moments of stillness. Body absorbing the postures. Finding that healing, finding that rest. Allow yourself to be in your Shavasana for as long as you need it. If it's longer than I've given you here, then just tune out the sound of my voice. Stay where you're at. When you are ready to move forward into your Friday evening, we'll start with some small, gentle movement. Hands and feet, fingers and toes are a good place to start. If you're on your belly, you might press back to child's pose or roll over onto your back to make the transition. Continue to move slowly as you reawaken. And we'll all meet in a seated position, keeping your eyes closed along the way if at all possible. Or gently reclosing them once you get there. Let's take the palms to the hands to your thighs, either palms up or palms down, whatever you're feeling. Take a nice deep breath in. Nice deep sigh out. And then moving the hands to heart center, palms pressing together, Anjali Mudra, symbol of our gratitude. Extending that in and extending that out. And bowing with honor, with grace, with love, as we say to each other, Namaste. Thank you, my yogis.